morning, girls. I'm going to talk to you this morning about the way you look.
She says her daughter died for beauty and she doesn't want other families to experience the same pain.
1 in 10 Americans suffer with an eating disorder.
First of all, every woman has body worries. I'm not exempt from that.
That urgent warning about the possible dangers of plastic surgery to get a look like Kim Kardashian's.
And I was crying because I was hungry, but too because I was afraid to eat.
Men have taught us that we are supposed to focus on our looks before our potential.
She was happy. How could she be dead?
Your body is not the ideal.
Hello friends, and welcome to my channel. She is Hanani, and she is, well, me. Tiny waist, big hips, round butt, large breast, thigh gap, slender arms, thin face, pointed chin. This is the body that many people today aim for. While it's true that not everyone desires to have a figure like this, most everyone can recognize this figure for what it is. Ideal. Whether it is natural or modified, we see this body type every single time that we scroll down our timelines. Different face, same body, same reaction. If you haven't noticed, there have been a lot of videos out lately about the infamous BBL. Whether good or bad, people are talking about them. Personally, I don't have anything against plastic surgery or body modification. I know that for some people, it is essential for them to be able to feel their best. And I know that reconstructive surgery also falls under this category. The real question that I want to ask myself and you guys is, why do we feel the need to permanently change our bodies for the sake of a trend? BBLs are kind of in their own category of plastic surgeries because they are so dangerous, infamously dangerous. 1 in 3,000 to 5,000 BBLs end in death. Yet, the number of butt lifts has grown by 77.6% since 2015. Is it beauty that we seek? Validation, acceptance, happiness, fame, fortune? I don't know. But what I do know is that we've been looking for this mystical ideal for a really long time. For almost all of human history, people have sought to be beautiful and rich and liked and idolized. You would think that after 300,000 years of human existence, we would have figured this all out by now. How can we really be loved for who we are and what we look like, and how can we be ideal? Somehow we've overcome a countless number of diseases and natural disasters and wars and tragedies. We've developed technologies that can practically read our minds. We've developed as a species with agriculture and societies, yet we have still failed to remedy one of our longest standing epidemics, the hierarchy. The search for perfection and the attainment of status that we so strongly believe will make our lives better. Perfection, to be ideal. The idea of an ideal societal body is nothing new. In fact, one of the oldest pieces of art ever discovered is of a primitive Paleolithic era woman called the Venus of Willendorf, and was made somewhere between 24,000 and 22,000 BCE. The woman has large breasts, large hips, and a round stomach. This body ideal was linked to fertility. At that time, a fuller figure was a means of survival and seen as a privilege. While this piece could have been exaggerated, because it is art after all, it does show that being and looking well-nourished was sought after. Researchers believe that the Venus was likely used during rituals surrounding fertility and eroticism and femininity. So ancient Egyptians seem to place a lot of emphasis around physical appearance. In the art of the time, female bodies were depicted as slim and androgynous with narrow hips. The ideal male figure seemed to also be along the same lines, long and lean with narrow waists and broad shoulders. Ancient temples of the early dynastic period actually show some of the exercises that Egyptians would do to attain these bodies. This included using heavy sacks filled with sand, as well as stretches and body weight exercises. Although Egyptian artists seemed to emphasize what they deemed to be perfection, they also expressed respect for what they deemed to be more atypical forms, such as dwarfism. The syndrome was actually linked with gods that protected women during pregnancy and childbirth. Sages taught people to respect those with disabilities, and we can actually see that reflected in the art of the time. There's actually a wisdom text placed alongside a wooden figure from sometime between 1295 to 1065 BCE, and it reads, "Do not laugh at a blind man, ridicule a dwarf, or impede the disabled." In Greece, during the Hellenistic era, female bodies were represented with rounder hips and butts, long legs, and smoother shapes. The Venus de Milo statue from 100 BCE that depicts Aphrodite is likely the most pointed to example of beauty standards of the time. Aphrodite is represented as having an athletic build with a toned stomach and average-sized breasts. Like almost all beauty standards throughout history, Grecian standards were dictated by men. So, like society does, I will be focusing on these arbitrary rules that affect women. This is not to say that men have not been indirectly or directly impacted by beauty standards. Many absolutely have, and society still puts these impossible, macho standards on how men should and shouldn't conduct themselves and present themselves, and how masculine they should be, etc. But these standards for men still come from the same place that they come from for women: misogyny and the male gaze. And throughout history, the male gaze has subjected women to these beauty standards more so than it has men. And coming back to Greece, Pythagoras of Samos, who you likely know from math in high school, is the Pythagorean theorem guy. Was that middle school? Yeah, that guy for math. Also created a golden ratio of perfection and beauty. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you, Pythagoras. Thank you. So, most of the beauty standards that are typically addressed and typically talked about are based off of Western beauty standards. But the world is so much bigger than just the West. Because I live in the West, and because a lot of the information out there treats non-Western countries and history as if it doesn't even exist, most of the examples that I touch on will be from the West. However, I did want to take a moment to address just a few other historical beauty standards that have been seen throughout the world. The standards of beauty differed greatly from place to place before this mass, universal, Eurocentric ideal spread across the world. Historically, Chinese women were expected to be pretty thin and have a very small frame. In the Han Dynasty, small feet were admired. This led to foot binding being popularized in order to achieve what they deemed to be a delicate look. So I don't want to lump all of Africa together like many people do when discussing it because, well, it is a whole continent. So depending on country and tribe, standards throughout Africa have varied greatly. Tribal markings can actually be found throughout many different tribes in Africa, and many tribes consider these markings to be a standard of beauty. These markings have been seen as a means of identification as well as markings of royalty. They've varied in shapes and sizes and even locations. These marking positions also vary depending on the tribe. In Iya-Ife, they draw 3 straight lines on the cheek, while in Owu, they draw 6 vertical lines on each side of the cheeks. In Nupe, their marks were in curves on the cheeks, and the Igbos drew 2 straight lines on the sides of the eyes. Africans have also used hair as a way to express beauty. Hair could represent a person's tribe, spirituality, and family background. Hair could tell someone's age, financial status, their rank in the social hierarchy, and their tribe. To represent royalty, more elaborate hairstyles were worn. And then during mourning, the hair was left to wit. So it really signifies the state of things. Thick hair was considered a sign of fertility, and clean hair represented a woman's ability to bear children. Piercings, lip discs, intricate beading, and jewelry have also been cultural symbols of status, spirituality, and beauty. It was a little bit harder to pinpoint a specific ideal throughout the Middle Ages because religion was extremely prominent during this time, so bodies weren't really on display. But I did find that many people of the Middle Ages found more appealing physical features to be signs of higher morality. Unless you were a woman, then it was a sign that you were a sinner. It was either one or the other. There was really no in between. You're either a very moral person or you're the devil's helper. Nothing in between. No. These ever-present religious values definitely affected this and made people think that outer appearance was correlated with inner virtue, while those deemed unattractive were seen to be cursed. But like I said, You don't want to be too beautiful because then that means that you are a vessel of Satan.
You're a tool of the devil.
Watch out, Kim K. The beauty standards seem to be a thinner figure with a rounder stomach and a higher forehead. Eyebrows were sometimes shaved to have this high forehead look, and head coverings were typically worn for religious reasons. During the early Renaissance, artists moved away from the stricter, more religious values of the Middle Ages and started to depict their subjects in the nude. Their body ideals typically favored women with larger lower halves, small breasts, and fuller stomachs. Large foreheads and pale skin was also idolized. Large foreheads should still be idolized, if you ask me. Hairlines were typically plucked to create the look.
You better hide your baby or... I'm just playing.
You better hide that big ass forehead.
Queen Elizabeth was crowned in 1558 at the age of 25 and quickly became the pinnacle of beauty. Elizabeth brought in a new era of makeup, whereas before, a woman with a full face of makeup was deemed to be the incarnation of Satan. Elizabeth, on the other hand, wore quite a generous amount of makeup, with a signature red lip and a thick coat of lead-based white powder to paint her face. Yeah, lead. The perfect face and figure of the time was one like Queen Elizabeth's. Women dyed their hair red, painted their faces whiter, and flattened out their chests. They even painted veins on their body in order for their skin to look more translucent like Elizabeth's. Elizabeth was also long and tall, which made that silhouette a very sought-after one. Fashion changed rather slowly throughout the 17th century. From the mid-1620s to the mid-1630s, the most sought-after silhouette was a softer one. Dresses had high waists and full sleeves. Throughout Europe, dress became more relaxed, except for in what is now the Netherlands, where the ruff remained the neckwear of choice. Body ideals of this time were mostly achieved through clothing styles. This ideal was softer and rounder. Women were seen as more beautiful with a round or oval face, fuller figure, a small double chin, and high forehead. The Windsor Beauties portraits by artists Sir Peter Lely and Peter Paul Rubens, the Three Graces, depicted this ideal. Throughout the 1630s and 40s, this softer silhouette was still in style, but a more opulent look returned to both England and France in the later 17th century. Boned garments also took off in popularity around this time, causing for a new silhouette to emerge. While corsets, or more accurately stays, have been seen throughout history as a practical undergarment, the late 1600s and early 1700s popularized a more elaborate version. Although tight lacing was not as common as TV or film depicts,
tighter! Easy to breathe, Mama!
The new sought-out silhouette did feature a straighter waistline and more wide-set hips. Throughout the 18th century, most fashion was set in the French courts and then trickled down to the rest of Europe. Skirts became larger and larger, which further popularized the straight waist and wider hip silhouette. At this point, fashion was the creator of the body ideal, and wealth gave certain people the ability to achieve it. During the Regency era, waistlines were higher and silhouettes were sleeker than those of the 18th century. But when Queen Victoria was crowned in 1837, a more delicate look for women became popularized. Crinolines became wider and waists became smaller. Ideal women were said not to be too strong or hardy. Lacing corsets tighter became a trend as small waists were seen to emphasize a woman's weakness. Makeup of this time was also very dangerous, with ingredients such as lead, again, ammonia, mercury, and nightshades. And it's not that the Victorians were ignorant of the effects of these poisons, but more so that women had the beauty is pain mindset that many of us still have today, and a lot of us heard growing up. So basically, they knowingly poisoned themselves in order to be more beautiful. Male-dominated society and desire favored a weaker, submissive woman, and many women died to be just that. Moving on to the Edwardian era, beauty ideals changed yet again. From the late 19th century to the early 20th century, the Gibson girl was the personification of the feminine ideal. The Gibson girl was known for her S shape and had a larger bust, small waist, and large hips. This S shape was achieved by wearing a swanbill corset. The 20s saw one of the most dramatic changes in fashion and body ideals. And if you want to see a video that talks a little bit more about the 20s and the youth influence, then click somewhere up here. But overall, youth propelled fashion, and changing morals and urbanization in the US led to this. The shedding of multiple layers led to body-dominated ideals, whereas fashion could no longer easily create these sought-after shapes. Slender and boyish appearances became more popular as fashion focused on long and androgynous lines. Starvation diets and rolling machines also became the norm in order for women who were not naturally this slender to achieve the look. This was the start to modern diet culture. The ideal woman of the 30s had round and higher breasts, small waists, and rounder hips. By the 1940s, slender legs enhanced by high heels and hemmed stockings became the focus of beauty ideals. The ideal bust also grew at this time. By the 50s, ultra-femininity ruled fashion. Full skirts and cinched waists were all the couture house rage. The body ideal followed suit with an hourglass figure trend. So slimmer waists and larger busts were in style. Dominated youth culture once again changed fashion. The sought-after body type reverted back to that of the 1920s. Slim, boyish, and androgynous figures were yet again in style. This look was pioneered by the likes of Twiggy. The 70s idolized a similar physique. Long and willowy as pants now accentuated legs. The 80s was the dawn of the supermodel era. Exercise culture also became the norm in the West. So, obviously, these factors affected the ideal body of the time. Tall and athletic figures were in vogue with toned arms and legs and slight curves. The boom of workout classes and videos encouraged a thin yet fit look. Unfortunately, health misinformation was more widespread, and there was an uptick in eating disorders during this time as well. The 90s heroin chic look is pretty well known. During this time, models became thinner and more androgynous, and a more delicate look was very popular. Pale and translucent skin was very fashionable, and these ideals were based around figures such as Kate Moss. The early 2000s brought in this new era of sexual liberation in media. Also, teen celebrities were the it people of the time. The era was heavily inspired by the 60s and 70s with a futuristic fashion revival. The cover model was no longer the set ideal, ushering a new kind of spotlight for actresses and pop stars. And now the coveted model was the Victoria's Secret angel. The popular silhouette was anywhere from very thin to a thin, curvy look. Larger chests and small bodies became more idolized as breast augmentations grew popular. A plump butt was also ideal, but only to a certain degree. By 2007, eating disorders were at their peak in Hollywood. From the year 1999 to 2010, the deaths of famous people suffering from anorexia was as large as the total sum of famous anorexia deaths in all of the 20th century. So quickly on the 2010s, as someone who really grew up during this era, I noticed a huge boom in body positivity and a fight to normalize bodies in their natural states. I think that the 2010s was definitely a breakthrough era, but now it seems like we're reverting back a little bit. I'm kind of unsure as to whether a body positivity era has ever happened in the past before, and then we just continued on searching for body ideals yet again. While body positivity is still really popular and a really big movement, it has kind of died down as this new body ideal has come along. So that's a question if any of you guys know if there was another era of body positivity. Obviously things are more widespread now because of the internet, so if there was a movement, maybe it wasn't widespread, but let me know if you know anything about that. So even though the 2010s did focus heavily on body positivity and the movement was booming, there was still an ideal body type. We all know Tumblr girls. It was typically very white and pretty thin. Racism has played a major role in cultivating the ideal in the West. Specifically in America, black and brown bodies have been feared. For hundreds of years, the Eurocentric standard of beauty has grown to be the typical standard of beauty all over the world. The look of light skin, lighter eyes, and straight hair has been revered, especially in the West. Other forms of beauty are often erased, and only recently have they seen some representation in media. Black and brown people have endured hundreds of years of ridicule in America, especially in regards to their features. Minstrel shows and other forms of blackface exaggerated and made mockeries of black features for years, and this type of mockery continues still today in more subtle forms of racism. However, black and brown features have been purposefully imitated and made into beauty ideals, but only if they're on white or more white-passing bodies. For example, black people in America have often been ridiculed for their full lips, but But in recent years, white Americans with full lips have been praised for their beauty. Many Asian Americans have been mocked for having monolids or almond eyes, but these features have been glorified on white people and those who have more Eurocentric accompanying features. The same goes for body shapes and sizes. Obviously, sexism has played a major role in deciding the beauty standards, as many beauty standards were created by men, but fitting the standard is seen as a job of a woman. You may have noticed that most of the beauty standards that I've addressed pertain to women. I am not saying that men are not objectified or held to certain standards of beauty, but for the most part, women have endured the brunt of judgment pertaining to their looks, which then decides their place in society. Oppressive beliefs and the male gaze have created these standards throughout time. How a woman looks has decided her place in society throughout most of modern history. Western beauty standards are the products of a capitalistic patriarchy, which have kept us consuming and consumed. The idea of class has been a pretty consistent factor throughout time in regards to beauty standards. During times of famine, larger bodies were preferred, while in times of abundance, slimmer bodies were the ideal. Whatever the wealthiest could afford became ideal. Throughout history, being able to keep up with beauty standards and the trends was a privilege for the rich. Many people of lower classes were not able to participate or were just seen as unfashionable in their natural state. The 1920s was an abundant time for America, so a thinner frame was seen as a sign of wealth and abundance. The ability to access the latest diet trends and to dance and to party was a privilege. In the 1980s, wealthier people were able to have access to gyms and to workout regimens. Similarly today, the body ideal is heavily dependent on plastic surgery and body modification, which can cost thousands of dollars for a single procedure. So when looking at body ideals, I think it's important to question our motives and to question our prejudices in regards to class or race or sex. Do you really dislike that body type, or do you have some type of prejudice towards the people that typically have it? So here's the hard part. It's imperative that we realize that our bodies will never be the ideal. This isn't to say that your body isn't perfect the way it is. In fact, I'm actually saying just that. The ideal is a fraud. It is ever changing. And while you may be the ideal today, you just as easily won't be tomorrow. The ideal keeps you wanting and wishing and striving for something that doesn't exist. The ideal is just a figment of our imagination. It is just as not real as many of the edited pictures that we see every day. And it's crazy because this is obvious. We can never seem to grasp this ideal. As soon as we think we have it and we think we know what it is, it morphs into something unrecognizable. So guys, I am saying this to myself just as much as I'm saying it to you, but please just join me in an attempt to rest. I'm tired of chasing, and I am so tired of seeing everyone around me chase something that simply doesn't exist. Let's just try to be happy and try to just live. Thank you guys so much for joining me again today. Let me know what you want to talk about. Do you have anything specific or just like a general idea? Let me know. Let me know down in the comments. Follow me on Instagram at SheIsHanani. Let me know in my DMs over there too. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that little notification bell if you want to see more of me.
Fake asses, fake tits, fake lips, fake hair, fake eyelash.
Now here's a thought. Women are more than just their bodies. Oh, now here's another thought. Adult women do things for themselves and not the approval of men. Now hear this one. People need to stop objectifying women. People who have had work done are still people. You know, it's so sad to see because I see this all the time when women who may or may not have had work done get criticized constantly, and it's so normalized in the comment section. It's like a domino effect. Somebody sees someone insulting them, calling them plastic, and they join in too. People need to stop commenting on other people's bodies. If it's not your own body, don't worry about it. It ain't your business. It'll never be your business. It'll never be your choice. Now here's a thought. Let's love all women.